Hi, this is Ed from Exotic Blanks, welcoming you to Turning Tips. Today I'm going to be making this pen from this material. This is a glacier pen, and it's being made out of a mosaic that we offer. One of the customers mentioned that he was having some trouble with this product, and so I thought I would try it and find out exactly what we could learn from it. This is called Color Explosion Mosaic, and the one that I'm using is in red and blue. It comes in several different flavors. So let's get started and see what problems we run into and how we solve them. Thank you for watching. Our customer told me that he had been using the Easy Wood tool to try to turn it, and that he had been using the straight cutter, that is to say the one that is not radiused. Now the one I'm using is radiused, but that was all I had. So we're using the Easy Wood carbide tool, and as you can see I'm going back and forth and things are coming off very nicely. It seemed like things were going great. One of the things about this tool and in any carbide tool is that you need to make sure that you keep the tool level so that it cuts. It's actually a scraper tool, so you're trying to take off material as it comes down over the top of the blank. One of the things that we discussed and I was somewhat concerned about was that these generally don't cut at one point. They generally are cutting more than 1 point on your blank. Actually, as you can see, the ribbons that are coming off here are nearly 1/8 of an inch wide, so I'm essentially taking 1/8 of an inch off at a time. I didn't think I was going to do any damage, but as time goes on we find out that yes indeed I did remove a piece, which was good because it told me what was happening for the gentleman who was having difficulty. So I tried to go back through the video and actually find where the piece came off. I was unable to do that. I spent an awful lot of time going one frame at a time, and I still couldn't see where it came off. So essentially it comes off in a big hurry, and you don't really see or feel anything when it happens. It just removes the piece. So that's the problem. Now we need to move into what do we do to solve it. I took this close-up to show that there is a piece missing, and it's a pretty substantial piece, and if you look you can see that we're pretty close to the bushing, so there's not a lot of room to do a lot of repair here, but I think we can make it happen, and as it turns out this is obviously after the thing is completed, so yes, it did work. What I did first of all was drop back to the skew where I knew that it would touch only 1 point. I think the problem here, as I've said before, is that the tool was probably touching too wide a point, and therefore when these edges came up it was capable of prying off the piece because it was going at high rate of speed, of course, and because the edge just grabbed the edge of the tool grabbed the edge of the piece. So I think if we use a 1 point contact like we do on the skew, a sharp skew, that will solve the problem, or at least prevent this thing from happening again. As you can see, the spot is getting a little bit smaller, and every time we look at it, it will be a little smaller as we take off a little bit at a time. One of the things I'd like to call your attention to is that in contrast to the carbide tool where we were taking off ribbons that were about 1/8 of an inch wide, here we're taking off ribbons that are really very, very narrow. What that means is that the blade is only touching at 1 point, and therefore we're only cutting off little tiny ribbons. Now I can take things down pretty quickly doing that because you could move the tool pretty fast, so you don't really lose anything from that. People may say, well then the only thing you can use is a skew. No, not necessarily. I have seen people use a carbide tool and turn it slightly. I don't understand carbide tools particularly well, so I'm not going to try to teach you how to use one, but by the same token it can be used in a way that will allow you to touch much narrower plates. Now, of course, you could also use one of the round carbide blades, if that's what they call them, carbide inserts. That only touches at 1 point. So if you're using a round insert, you're not going to have, I don't think you're going to have the same problem maybe that's the answer. If you want to use carbide, use the round tip, and that'll take care of the problem. Now, we're moving into sanding. I tried to stay very close up so that you could see the angle of my skew, just so that if you want to try to do it that way, you can see how I did it. Then we went into the 400 grit sanding and 600 grit sanding, as I usually do. What I was trying to do at this point is just make the piece look pretty good, get rid of any scratches, tool marks, etc. At this point, I'm prepping this so that I can ultimately use a CA coating on it. It's not going to be a CA finish, but what we are going to do is reinforce this alumilite with some CA. That's coming in a little while here. So there's the 400 and then the 600 grit, and that gets us to the point where we have a nice looking blank. As I said, now I'm just going to reinforce this blank a bit. I'm talked to a friend of mine who does quite a bit with alumilite, and he suggested that you can get a nice shine if you just put a couple of coats of thin CA over it. That is very quick. You'll see that I put the first coat on, and then the second coat on goes in 45 seconds. From there, you're ready to put on a medium CA. I put on one coat of medium CA. It was a pretty thick coat, but it was one coat. And then I let the blank sit overnight. I prefer to do any sanding of CA after it's had a thorough chance to cure. I suppose it could be done an hour or two later, but I prefer to let it sit overnight, which is what I did. So at this point, we're finishing it up, and it's ready to spend the night curing. So now we're at the next day, and then if the sequence of events at this point is just to sand the CA finish down with 400 grit, then make it smoother with 600 grit. The total time that took me was about 75-80 seconds. From there we went into the Novus 3, which is your heavy scratch remover. From the Novus 3 you go into the Novus 2, which is the light scratch remover. So in a very short time you end up with a beautiful pen blank and the beginnings of a beautiful pen. It's not very difficult, and it really does turn out to be a nice looking pen. I've been told people like to watch the sanding and the finishing and all the rest of that, so I'm going to let this continue to play. Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about alumilite. I have had very little experience turning alumilite. When I was turning pens, everything I did was with polyresin. Don was one of the first in polyresin, and so we were goofing around with a number of drops and lots of stuff, but it made me into a much better turner because some of the stuff I turned was about as brittle as glass. But alumilite is a treat to turn. On the other hand, it sometimes may not polish as well as the other polyresin used to. But a friend of mine, actually two different friends this week, suggested to me that you can make alumilite polish better by using this CA. Put 2 or 3 coats of thin CA on it, and then 1 or 2 coats of medium CA. You're not going to build a finish like you do on wood. You're not trying to make it look plastic. You're trying to make it look shiny. And the concept seems to me to be pretty smart. Obviously, you don't need world-famous CAs. You can use simple Easy Bond at $5 for 2 ounces, and you won't have to break the bank. So it gives you something that will definitely enhance the ability to buff and the ability to polish and any other finishing technique that you're trying to use with your alumilite. At this point, you'll see that I tried to put a shine line across this so that you could see what the material is very shiny and that it has taken a nice shine, even though I didn't use a buffer on this one yet. To be honest with you, before I finished it, I did use a buffer just because I'm so used to it and because I could see radial scratches even when I was finished with the buffing or the shining on the lathe. So I still think a buffing system is a necessary piece of equipment if you're doing plastics. But Novus 3 and Novus 2 I used for many years before I had the buffer. It's not a bad product, and it gives you a very nice end pen, just not as nice as buffing in my opinion. So that's all there is to it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until I come up with some other good reason or another customer calls me and says here's what you need to do, this is Ed from Exotic Blanks saying thank you for watching and hope to see you at the next one. If you want to, you can subscribe to the channel and then you get these things automatically. You can see this turned out to be really pretty. It's a beautiful blank, and it's not a difficult blank to turn, but it was fun and I enjoyed it, and this is what the pen looked like. Have a good evening. Thanks for watching. Bye now.